all of the best written emails in the world or messages on whatever, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, you can write the best emails in the world. But if that person is not looking for your thing right then, I mean, they're not going to reach out.
Hi, I'm Eleanor Meyerhofer, a native Californian designer and digital strategist. In October of 1999, a few years after graduating from design school, I flew from San Francisco to Munich with a fistful of Deutschmarks, a dial-up connection, and an extremely vague plan. 20 plus years later, after a 10-year stint at a global agency, freelancing, and launching 2 online businesses, I'm still here. Now I'm talking to other expat business owners to share knowledge, stories, and inspiration for other non-Germans running businesses in Germany. Today I'm talking to Tim Nash from The Path to Peak Performance. And Tim is an experienced coach, a facilitator, and a trusted advisor. For over 2 decades, he's helped young professionals to C-level executives generate clarity, confidence, and momentum for lasting change. Tim is also a friend of mine. We met a few years ago, and our paths to Germany are ridiculously similar. We're both around the same age. We both were living in the Bay Area before coming to Germany. And him and I are in, I sort of might call it a mastermind, but it's more like a support group. It's him, myself, and another friend who's also a Californian who lives in Madrid. And we would talk like once a month and just swap business woes and successes. And there was so much in this story and my conversation with Tim that I didn't know before that I found super interesting. And I hope you do too. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Tim. So I'm going to start with the question I ask everybody, which is, where are you from? And can you give me the 2-minute version of how you ended up in Germany?
Okay, I'll do my best. The first question is actually already a challenge because I was born in Los Angeles, but my family relocated from California up to Oregon, so was up in the Pacific Northwest for about 10 years. Anyway, Munich's been home for over 20 years now, so I consider Munich kind of hometown now, but originally Los Angeles.
Right.
And
how'd you get here?
2-minute story. I had come to Europe with a backpack a few years out of university and came through Munich, of course, and loved it. This is in my 20s, and then was doing a job in the States later where I had the opportunity to work in the Munich area again. So then in 2001, when I was living in San Francisco, I met a young lady who was from Munich, and she couldn't stay in San Francisco. She had to come back to Munich, and I had lived overseas in Asia for a couple of years, and I thought I was ready to relocate to the US. I wasn't. I met her, and she told me where she was from, and I said, "Can I follow you over there? I'd love to live in that part of the world." So I came, a few weeks before September 11th, 2001, and I've been here ever since.
Wow.
That's short enough for you.
Yeah, that's it. I'm impressed. You really condensed it. And also, we met like what, 2 years ago?
Couple years ago,
which is
pre-pandemic.
astonishing.
Pre-pandemic.
Because our paths are like so similar.
I know.
Roughly the same age, coming at the same time.
I know.
But it sounds like Munich was really your destiny.
Well, I knew I wanted to. Actually, I was really into snowboarding at that stage of my life, and I just wanted to like come live near the Alps and snowboard every chance I got. And my first choice actually was Innsbruck because I had spent some time in Innsbruck as well. But Munich is pretty close to that, and the Alps are close. So anyway, my girlfriend at the time, Miriam, who we met exactly 22 years ago in San Francisco, I'm still with her. She's now my wife, and I don't snowboard anymore, but I still love the Alps.
Okay, yeah. Things change for the better and for the worse. So tell me a little bit. We'll talk about what you're doing now in your business, but you said you were working a job in when you were still in the States. Like, what is your professional background?
Bit of everything, my last couple of years at the university, I worked at a bank, and sort of thought that was my future, working in the banking and financing industry, which was kind of sexy in the 90s, right? Banking, and got a job in downtown LA, an entry-level job at a big mutual funds house. Even though I had sort of studied history and political science and planned to go on to law school, that was my sort of ambition in my college years. But I had a business background as well. I had studied business was my minor, so and I thought, okay, banking and finance, I'll just earn some money, and maybe then go back to law school after I've earned some money, uh, and then I ended up quitting that job and going overseas. As I mentioned, I lived
Mm-hmm.
overseas in Far East Asia for a couple of years, teaching English.
Mm-hmm.
I got the travel bug,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you know, my life became more about not what I was doing, but well, let's say the focus was to do something that allowed me to travel.
Right.
And
Okay.
my hobby hobby, which was international travel, kind of
Mm-hmm.
became the main thing. The job became secondary. Obviously, I never went back, never went to law school, didn't become a
Mm-hmm.
lawyer. I kept traveling, and then what I mentioned before, I relocated to San Francisco in the late '90s, thinking I was done with traveling, done with that, but obviously I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so since I've been here, I
Yeah.
started doing. I didn't speak the language, but I needed money to
Yeah.
stay here. I needed to find a
So
work.
annoying.
It's one of those things. So I got a job teaching business English in companies.
Okay.
This is again sort of fall 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it wasn't my dream job, but I had this
Mm-hmm.
background in business, but also in
Mm-hmm.
teaching English. I'd been doing that over in Japan and South Korea, so
Okay.
it was a perfect fit for me. But I quickly realized, well, if I were to make a profession of this, this is not my dream profession.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching English, I hadn't studied English or teaching, but it's one of those things that allowed me to keep moving. So then I slowly, I remember at a party, 2003 or four, meeting a guy, and he said he was an intercultural trainer. I said, well, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, why don't you come to my next workshop and you can be a role player and you'll see what it is. And I loved it. And I started doing that on my own. I got certified as an intercultural trainer. And that's kind of, to answer your question,
Yeah.
since then, I've kind of just followed my interests a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
done a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the common thread, I guess, in everything I've done over the last, 20 to 25 years has been learning by doing and sort
Okay.
of learning the skill or getting the certificate when I needed it,
Okay.
whether that was intercultural training or, last year I did something to become an agile certified professional
Okay.
because lots of my clients for the last few years have asked, are you an agile coach? Or, so I thought, okay, no, it's time. I have the time. I did a 3-day virtual certification course to learn more about this agile thing. Um, but that's kind of been the pattern for me.
Okay. Okay. So
Um,
let's jump forward, and I might want to go back and dig more into the path there, but
sure.
talk to us about your business now and how you started it.
Well, again, I don't think, unlike a lot of people, I didn't have the hard start date or let's
Okay.
say the official opening like you would if you opened a cafe or
Yeah.
something else. So my sort of business now obviously looks a lot different from how it looked 20 years ago or 15
Mm-hmm.
or even 10 or 5 years ago, especially after the pandemic, because my work went from probably 95% face to face in companies, working with teams and groups and coaching in companies, and that all stopped. All the face to face
Right.
stuff stopped, from one day to the next, as it did for many of us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, but now that things have opened up again, for the last year or so, I am back in companies and doing more of the corporate work that I did before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
This might be giving you too many details, but to tell you where I am right now, or let's say what my business looks like right now,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm really a solopreneur. I don't have a team.
Mm-hmm.
I have something called the Path to Peak Performance, which
Mm-hmm.
started as a blog,
Aha.
but
Okay.
really became more of an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So my newsletter, my blog, my coaching practice, it's all
Mm-hmm.
kind of under the Path to Peak Performance, which is like
Mm-hmm.
this ecosystem. And so it's not like a traditional business per se.
Mm-hmm.
It's a series of relationships and partnerships that I have. And I have several clients like Airbus and Allianz and a few others
Right.
who I contract directly with, and those are based on relationships I've had for many years. But I also work with network partners.
Uh-huh.
So coming to a big challenge of being a solopreneur, and that is acquisition, finding clients
Right.
and
Right.
building new relationships and finding enough work and things like that. So especially the last couple of years, I had to rely on some of those partners, companies, small consultancies who
Mm-hmm.
have access to lots of clients, especially
Mm-hmm.
the sort of the European and German network,
Mm-hmm.
and who I can go to and say, okay, um, this is my experience, this is my skill set. I work in English, and if they
Mm-hmm.
have let's say, a request for an English speaking leadership trainer or something, then
Mm-hmm.
the network partner might reach out to me, and so that's some of my work comes from that as well.
Okay. Okay. So let's dig into that because there's a lot in there about relationships. And so, you become this intercultural trainer.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that was a while, that was kind of at the beginning, it sounds like.
Yes, that's
So,
good 20 years ago now, almost. Yeah,
yeah, you're Tim, fresh, new Munchner,
yeah.
and you got this certification. How did you get these relationships? How did you get work in the beginning to get traction?
Well, I think you already said the relationships. It all comes down to like any kind of social capital I have or any kind of equity I have in my business. It comes down to those relationships. You
And how did you
know.
get those early ones?
Okay, so I'll give you one example. So I was teaching English, and I
Mhm.
kept teaching English in different companies, business English, as well as starting to do some intercultural training workshops and things like that. It was very much, management soft skill training
Mhm.
things, not technical, but on the soft skills, which included things like intercultural skills and maybe negotiation skills or conflict management skills, things like that. So I would meet people, and so one example, I was teaching a woman English, and she
Mhm.
was working in the HR department or sort of learning and development of the Allianz Management Institute. Oh no, sorry, for in the HR of Allianz,
Mhm.
and this is 2006, maybe
Mhm.
2007. And again, I'm not clear on the dates exactly, but it was a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to her, you know, tell me about your colleagues in learning and development, because she was sitting in
Mhm.
HR, but not L&D, learning and development. But that was my area of interest.
Mhm.
And she introduced me to a guy who was running this thing called the Allianz Management Institute.
Mhm.
And it was perfect timing, as things often are,
Yeah.
because he was in a situation, he was leading this team of, development people, and he had one employee who was, a long-term disability kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
he needed someone quick to sort of step into what she was doing.
Mhm.
And we had a good connection. This guy, I'm still in touch with him. He's no longer with the Allianz group, but I'm still in touch with him. Um, he, he's German, but he had an MBA from Cornell, so he sort of,
Mhm.
I think he spent some time in the U.S. Obviously, so he was sort of familiar with uh, my culture, and that is,
Mhm.
giving people lot of responsibility quick and seeing it, sort of putting them in the deep end, seeing if they can
Mhm.
swim.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what he did with me. And fortunately, I could swim,
Yeah.
and I would do things. And the more I would do, and I obviously did okay, he would give me more
Mhm.
different projects, and I then was able to bring some ideas from my own. I don't think yeah, some intercultural things, but also communication things, um, and I still do things for Allianz, not him obviously, and not for
Yeah.
the Allianz Management Institute, but I still have.
But you got in there.
I'm in there, and that's going back
Yeah.
again to 2007, six. This
Yeah.
this is a long time ago,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of stories like this, but there's always a relationship that sort of
Right.
you can trace it back to.
But it's interesting, and but that you got the opportunity from teaching English that took you in the direction you wanted to go.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
just some nitty gritty things. So, I'm assuming you were substanding at this. You were just operating like you didn't. like you were married, so like all the visa stuff you were able to deal with. I
Well,
mean,
actually,
or was it a big deal?
it was a big deal because we weren't married, and
Ah,
so I had to, and this is one reason that it was a perfect fit for me to teach this business English, not only for the
uh-huh.
reasons I've already said, but it gave me it was a full-time job, even though it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't working full-time for this English school,
Mm-hmm.
but I got a Festanstellung.
Yeah. Okay.
So I could get the work permit and the
Yeah.
residence permit
Right.
through that. And then after 5 years, as you probably know, after five
Yeah.
years,
Then you get
married or
your
not, you can apply
yeah.
for
Get your
permanent
yeah.
residency. So I already had permanent residency before I got married.
Ah,
So I don't even know how
another
that works.
similarity. Another
Okay.
similarity.
Okay. So I don't even know how that works. I mean, I'm sure that's a way too to stay, but I didn't need to go that route.
Yeah. Okay. And I think now it's like even you only have to work 4 years before you
Oh,
get
really?
your
Okay. Yeah, it used to be
Niederlassungsbewilligung.
five, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're loosening things up. We were like the pioneers. Um,
Um,
so and then another question, this being Germany
mhm,
and Germany loving Ausbildungs and
mhm,
qualifications,
mhm, mhm.
when this guy at the Cornell guy from
Yeah.
Allianz was, I mean, did the fact that you had this intercultural training, was that like, or was just your American university degree enough? Like, did you need to show any like
Yeah.
fancy degrees to get the job?
Well, yeah, fortunately, he didn't ask me for any fancy degrees because I wouldn't have had any to show him. Once upon a time, a bachelor's degree was enough to
Yeah.
get your foot in the door, but probably
Yeah.
not anymore, right? Um, yeah, it's funny because I had a chance to meet up with this guy later,
Mhm.
and I was doing something in the London area, and he had relocated to the UK at that point, and we got together for coffee, as just peers, as
Mhm.
and I remember asking him. I said, why did you take a chance on me, even though I didn't have some of the
Yeah.
qualifications? And that time, a qualification to me was more like the learning and development experience or
Okay.
corporate experience
Mhm.
as opposed to shiny degree. I said, why did you take a chance on me? You didn't know me from anybody. And he said, well, I like to hire people based on their attitude,
Hmm.
not their skills. Um, and he said, you had the right attitude. So I went with you. And that, you know,
That sounds very American. So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And I don't know if it was Cornell. I remember he had an
Yeah.
MBA for somewhere, but
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you got this foot in the door at Allianz. So tell me, how did things evolve over the years to where you are now? So what happened from there?
well, fortunately, I still do have a lot of work coming from Allianz, but it's a different part of the business, so it looks very
Mhm.
different. It just happens to be the same company. Allianz is
Mhm.
such a big company, and they have different,
Mhm.
so a lot of people probably think I haven't worked there in years, although I do, but it's with another
Just
part
a
of the
different.
business.
Yeah.
Um, but another example. So sorry, I don't remember your exact question, Eleanor.
Just like what happened, so you started there and then like you're from between there, I mean not
Mhm.
every single thing, but what happened? How did things evolve to the point you aren't now?
Okay.
Your
So
business is
something
now.
significant. So at the time, I was working for this Allianz Management Institute, and again, keep in
Mhm.
mind, I'm still doing the business English.
Mhm.
I was doing things on the side. I also am a professional voice actor, and I did for about 10, if not, well, I still do it. So probably more like 15 years. Um, Again, right place, right time. Obviously, well, that's a different story. But so I
Yeah.
was doing things to supplement, obviously, or to make enough money to pay the
Yeah.
bills, right? As
Yeah.
we do. Um, and the Allianz Management Institute had a brochure of all of the workshops it was offering and seminars
Mhm.
that their
Mhm.
employees could choose from. I remember going through that 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 big thick brochure. I'm sure it's all virtual now, if they even still do it. But I
Yeah.
remember always looking to see who the partners were.
Ah.
Anyway, I landed on um, a company based in Munich who
Uh-huh.
Allianz was working with, and the
Mhm.
company was called Envision Learning Solutions. This is
Mhm.
2008, 2009. There were a couple that I found, but I sort of reached out to these companies that I found,
Mhm.
and eventually built a relationship with the guy who was running this company, Envision,
Mm-hmm.
and he hired me. This is sort of 2009. He hired me to work for them, and I ended up working for this small, again, like you could call it a leadership development consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working for them for 5 years
As a freelancer or
um,
a fest on?
as a freelancer, but
Okay.
70% of my time was going there. So I was kind of,
Okay.
and eventually I phased out of the relationship I told you about with the English school,
Mm-hmm.
and I phased out of that. I was still doing the voice acting on the side, which was a great way to supplement my income. Um, but so I, during those 5 years that I worked for this small company, and this is a huge benefit of working for a small company,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of you get to do everything and you have to do everything.
Yeah. So you
You
learn
know
a
that.
lot.
You know that if
Yeah.
you've ever
Yeah.
worked for a startup or a small
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
So I kind of learned how to do everything in those 5 years, from coaching to training to facilitating to everything.
Yeah.
Um, and at some point, so I phased out of that 2014, and so
Mm-hmm.
you could say that I've been fully selbstständig,
Yeah.
kind of, since if you had to pick a date, it would be January 1st, 2015, let's say.
Okay. So you said
Um,
okay. So you're out on your own. You're going
yeah.
to hang up your shingle in some capacity. Up until this point, were you taking like private clients or just doing all organizational stuff?
Um, it's always been a mix, it's always
Yeah.
been one of those things where was the need, again, first thing has been the relationship, whether the relationship was
Mm-hmm.
an individual or, well, usually an individual, but with the corporation behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but primarily my relationships were with companies and
Okay.
organizations, even if it was like a coaching. Occasionally there'd be somebody and they would hear I would do something and they would approach me about doing some coaching on the side or something. So occasionally it was individuals coming to me, but usually there were people with a company behind them. So I would
So
invoice the company then,
okay.
for whether it was
But then
executive coaching or training or whatever.
when you got private clients, were you like, by the way, I also take private clients, or were people reaching out to you and say, do you do private coaching? Like how did that all happen?
Well, I think, again, if I had to sort of look at, okay, when was the big shift? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, keep in mind, I've always kind of done a mix of stuff to pay the bills, as we
Yeah.
do as solopreneurs, right? But again, there's nothing sort of official. But going back to the start of the lockdowns and stuff, and when
Mm-hmm.
all the face-to-face work dried up,
Mm-hmm.
I had to make a really big pivot. I
Mm-hmm.
had to then make that official um, shift to targeting my services to like private individuals. So I became like
Mm-hmm.
this online coach you know, for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people would tell me, "Hey, can you send the invoice to my company?" So obviously their company
Yeah.
was supporting them, but
Okay.
it
But it
didn't matter to
was
me.
okay. Yeah. As
Didn't matter
long
to
as it
me.
gets paid.
Right. So, but my focus was for a couple of years was on the individuals, with or
Mm-hmm.
without a company
Right.
paying their coaching fees or whatever. Um,
And
yeah.
was that tricky getting like if you're involved with like the Envision and people that just are in your time at Allianz, when you sort of
Mhm.
have a foot in the door of a big corporation with big budgets,
Yeah.
presumably, you kind of start getting a pipeline of work and you've got lots of entry points.
Hmm.
How was that different from trying to get individual B2C coaching clients?
Well, totally different. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't rely on anybody to, to send you work. You have to,
Yeah.
you all of a sudden, you have to go, you eat what you kill yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was really challenging. All of a sudden I had to try to, and keep in mind though, I had, obviously I have a presence on LinkedIn and I had been trying to
Mhm.
connect with people for years. So I had, a few thousand
Mhm.
contacts, first degree contacts already on LinkedIn. So, you know, I think I had been doing things to sort of set myself up for that shift. such as
Mm-hmm.
I have had a blog since early 2015.
Right. Right.
That ecosystem, I'd already built it.
Mm-hmm.
So the infrastructure was kind of there.
Yeah.
Um, so when the corporate stuff dried up and I needed to shift to, okay, now just marketing to individuals, and here's
Mm-hmm.
Tim Nash and no
Mm-hmm.
Allianz behind me, no nothing
Mm-hmm.
behind me. I kind of had the infrastructure there. Um,
Right.
but it was super challenging, especially 2020 when it was all, kind of new, and I was just, meeting people and doing a lot of free discovery calls and trying to generate business. That was all new to me because
Yeah.
up until that
Okay.
point, it hadn't really been necessity. I had done it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but at that point, it was like, okay, now this is something I need to do not just 30 minutes a day. I need to do this 3 hours a day.
Yeah. Right. So tell
You
me
know,
about that. Like, what were the things that you did to pivot to get individual clients?
well, probably the biggest thing I did was reaching out for help.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I needed help with, not just like social media marketing, but like
Mm-hmm.
acquisition, finding
Mm-hmm.
clients. So
Mm-hmm.
I hired a guy who had actually, contacted me through LinkedIn about acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
finding clients. I contacted him. He was actually a marketing agency
Mm-hmm.
based in Barcelona, and was charging a lot for me
Mm-hmm.
for his service. I think it was around 1,000 a month or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he was helping me, and he wasn't doing some technical stuff, but he was saying like, okay, you should have a landing page for this.
Mm-hmm.
You should, when somebody connects with you, you should send them an email right away. And he was like
Mm-hmm.
helping me with tactics,
Like
you
outbound
know,
marketing
stuff
type
like that.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
stuff that I wouldn't have known, or let's say I
Yeah.
wouldn't have needed to do before then.
Right.
Any clients I would have acquired would have just been sort of kind of by accident or word of
Yeah. Yeah.
mouth, and this guy was giving me some structure
Yeah.
and saying, look, as a solopreneur, you need, and he's saying things like, okay, look, we need to, and he was helping me with LinkedIn tools, like, okay, look, let's get a drip campaign going. Let's
Mm-hmm.
sign up for this. Okay, you need a sales navigator and you need this tool. And then I'll write the copy and you just have to personalize it a little bit. And so
Mm-hmm.
so he was helping me with tactics.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably the biggest thing that I did, was reaching out for help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we get into that a little bit? So you already had like this groundwork, this ecosystem. You had your blog, your newsletter.
Hmm.
When you started that, if I'm not mistaken, you were at like doing more of the corporate work. So
Yeah.
what was the impetus to get that started, and who were you directing it at the people you were working with in these companies?
Mm, I mean, yeah, I mean, I would write a blog post, a blog article on leadership or change or
Mhm.
something, and hope that people I was connected to would see it.
Mhm.
But again, it wasn't some sort of strategic targeting I was doing.
Okay.
It really almost started as it was almost like a hobby,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
where I was writing the blog articles and researching things like that. I'd always, I was writing articles on things that interested me, like the imposter syndrome, or
Mhm.
different things, or like how do you get people to change, or
Yeah.
how does change work? And so I was, again, learning by doing. I was learning a
Yeah.
lot through writing these articles. So, but I suppose a part of me, and I had already started it. I worked with a different marketing guy. Come to think of it, when I was phasing out of the InVision job.
Mhm.
This is 2013, 14. I was already thinking and dreaming about being completely independent.
Okay.
So I was already trying to set myself up. So I remember, for example, this is 2014. Um, I hired this guy to help me, and he's the guy who actually created the blog for me, the Path to Peak
Mhm.
Performance.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
because I had a website. So he got me started on this blog on WordPress that's now my
Mhm.
website, but it was just my blog back then,
Yeah.
right? He helped me set up a webinar
Okay.
in 2014. Again, I was already thinking about, okay, now that I'm leaving the alliances and the envisions and
Mhm.
things, I was already thinking about, okay, how can I connect to non-companies and people? So I had already done some stuff,
Okay. So there
you
was a
know.
strategy there.
Yeah, but
and
again,
kind of
nothing. There
building
was
authority.
nothing like urgent about it
Yeah,
until the lockdown.
right, right. If you don't mind, I would like to dig into Sales Navigator a little bit.
Sure, sure.
I mean, did you find that worthwhile? Were you actually in there? I mean, this marketer you hired was helping you, but were you getting in there and like, was it worth it? I have like gone. I'm so on the fence of like,
It's so
I've
expensive, isn't it?
well, and it's also it just seems like this is something for a biz dev guy at a company, not like
Yeah,
little old me. I'm not going to just be sending cold emails all day to people, but then I think maybe it's just efficient in like organizing contacts. I don't know. Tell me, what was your experience?
well, keep in mind, and so I worked with two different people with Sales Navigator. There was this guy
Okay.
I mentioned based in Barcelona, and then I
Yeah.
worked with another woman who was a virtual assistant, but she was also happened to have a marketing background, and she was familiar
Mhm.
with LinkedIn Navigator, and she
Mhm.
or Sales Navigator,
Yeah.
and she got me back on there,
Yeah.
and but both times I was going in and I was editing my drip mails,
Mhm.
my email chains that I would send to new connections and also connecting to first connections. So now I've got like, I don't know, probably, I don't know, 6,500 or 7,000
Mhm.
first degree connections on LinkedIn. And a lot of those came from Sales Navigator, connecting with people so, so I am not the best person to ask that question that you asked simply
Yeah.
because I was always trying to, it was one foot in, one foot out.
Yeah.
And I was
Okay.
trying to outsource all that stuff. And so
Yeah.
they would tell me, "Hey Tim, go check out the third email on your current campaign and make the changes you want to or whatever."
Okay, once again. So is this an email or is it a LinkedIn message? Like what?
So with Sales Navigator, at least what I remember,
Yeah.
you can create these. They're not emails, no, but it
Okay.
works like an email drip where you have like a chain of five
Uh-huh.
and you can schedule them
To an
like you would with a funnel
individual.
to one of your connections. So the idea was, so here's what would happen so you find somebody you want to connect with,
Yeah.
and they connect with you, and then after that you send them the second. It's not an email, or you call it whatever you want, the
Yeah. And
message.
is it in mail? The like that
Well, you don't even have to use InMail at that point if they've connected with you.
right. So it's a message. Okay, some kind of message.
But once you sign up for the Navigator, you get like 20 free in-mails,
Yeah.
I think. So
Yeah.
so I don't remember. That's one of
Yeah.
those things I never really dove in and used because I didn't know kind of how to
Yeah.
do it. Um, so so yeah. So once they connect with you, then another one goes out saying, "Hey, thanks for connecting. By the way, what's your biggest challenge, leadership challenge, or whatever?" You ask them a
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
question, and then the next one says, "Hey, this could be a helpful tool." So it's like it works like a funnel would work, but it's
Okay.
not email.
And it's totally automated. It's
It's
just
totally automated. But
I
but
don't know.
you
Yeah.
know how you feel when you get these
Yeah,
automated
I know.
things.
That's all these people. It's like, yeah, I see. What's the shit in
So
my
I
yeah,
totally get your resistance. However, I used it enough to know that, okay, no, if you spent the time to personalize things, this could be really, really useful.
okay, that is different if and that's like I with those kinds of things, and I haven't been in there, but I automate a lot of stuff, but then I always get worried that I'm going to create this giant Rube Goldberg machine that's out of control and I
Right.
won't like know, oh wait, I was supposed to jump in and personalize it on that third email and it's just like running away without me. And if you're doing that on some kind of crazy, I just heard a podcast the other day and the guy's like, he was some LinkedIn guru guy.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I do about 100 of these a day and I get about 20 responses. And I thought, oh, that's a pretty good rate.
Mm.
But oh my God, like, you're just a machine at that point. And I don't know.
The one thing that I really liked about what I was doing, and I'm thinking about working with this the second time I used Sales Navigator. The first time I
Yeah.
really was not trying. I was not trying to touch it at all. I was
Yeah.
letting this guy Jaime do all
Yeah.
of the heavy lifting. The second
Yeah.
time with the virtual assistant who had the marketing background, I was much more involved. And the idea was that, again, I'm mixing this up probably, but
Yeah. Yeah.
like the idea was, okay, send out the first anonymous mail that's
Yeah.
automated, which
Yeah.
said, which says, "Hey, we've got some second or third degree
Mm.
connections in common. Would be great to connect with you." just a kind of a harmless kind of
Yeah.
connection request, right? Or let's
Yeah.
say an effective connection
Yeah.
request, anonymous,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Then the idea was that they would write back and
Uh-huh.
say, good to be connected. Or at some point during these five
Yeah.
mails, they would write back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I needed to jump in and write them back personally. And you can do all of that through the Sales Navigator.
Okay. And so it shows you where some things in the process, you can pause it, you can edit, you can.
You can, yeah. So
Yeah.
there are ways to, let's say, do it humanely,
Yeah.
or that,
With a little humanity.
yeah, exactly. There are ways, but again, it takes time. And if you
And
say like, I only have 15 minutes a day, then I'd say,
mm-hmm.
okay, well, give it a miss then,
Yeah. So, but this was at the point where you were like 3 hours a day, like this is my number one thing,
Well, keep in mind
and
that was just one of the things I
pandemic. Yeah.
was trying. I was
Yeah.
also trying to make videos because
Yeah.
I was convinced that, oh, okay, look, I got to do
Yeah.
some reels on Instagram because this is
Yeah.
how, what I mean, like
We
legit
all
was,
just get on that hamster wheel.
yeah, and so that was just one of you know several
18
things I was
million things.
doing.
Yeah.
So when I
And
say
so
3 hours, that includes like responding to anything that was on Facebook or something.
okay, so that wasn't just 3 hours LinkedIn stuff.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
And so here's the, $365,000 question. Was it effective? Did it work?
I could not as good as I wanted it to, but
Yeah,
yes, it worked.
it did.
It
Okay.
did work, and
Okay.
but it's funny, oftentimes when I would trace back, okay, where did this client come from
Yeah.
exactly, and I would trace back, and sometimes I could trace it back to, okay, this person, entered my second mail or third mail, and I
Uh-huh.
could trace it back, but oftentimes it was just somebody who I don't know. I couldn't trace it back.
Yeah. And
So it's really hard
sometimes
to answer your question.
that is murky because like I try to be pretty methodical about understanding, where all my clients come from, where all my leads come from. And sometimes it's weird. People will say word of mouth,
Yeah,
but really the person they said referred them, I have no idea who that person is, but
right.
they kept seeing my content on LinkedIn. So
That's the
it
thing. Yeah,
wasn't really, yeah, sure, it was word of mouth, but it wasn't. It was like content marketing.
right.
So,
I can
but
tell you. Sorry, go on, go on.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I can tell you my probably biggest learning from all of that,
Yeah.
from my
Yes,
experience
please.
of trying to
Mhm.
acquire people cold
Yeah.
through social selling,
Yeah.
through things like this.
Yeah.
My biggest learning, I think, was that the clients I did get, whether it was through Sales Navigator or through something they saw, I think actually somebody reached out. I commented on one of your LinkedIn posts,
Uh-huh.
and that person, I commented, so they saw me on your on your a comment I had given on yours, and then they reached out to me, and I had a discovery call with them.
Uh-huh.
That was one example. So,
Okay.
however they came to me,
Yeah.
whether I don't think she signed up. I don't think she signed up for coaching, but we had a
Uh-huh.
call. I
Yeah.
don't remember her name now, but
Yeah.
it was from my comment on one of your
You're
posts,
okay.
right? Okay, so you know it. You never know. You
Yeah.
can't always
Yeah.
trace it.
Yeah.
Um, so my one big learning was that I got my clients, and I could say this. I would say 90 to 100% of my clients came only when that person was looking for help with a specific problem, and whatever I said or whatever mail hit them, it spoke to them at that time, and they jumped on it. They jumped on a
Okay.
call with me or whatever. So my point is that um, I don't think in the world or messages on whatever, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, you can write the
Yeah.
best emails in the world, but if that person is not looking for your thing right then, I mean, they're not going
Yeah.
to reach out. People, and this is something about change. I'll say real quick, like people don't reach
Yeah.
out. People don't try to change unless their status quo has become really painful, right? You can say
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
nobody's going to reach out for coaching, for example, for my service, unless they
Mm-hmm.
feel like they are stuck. Like they are
Yeah.
stuck and
Yeah.
they need help getting out. And even then, they might not reach out for me. Even then, they'll try to go to a friend or,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
find something online or something. I mean, it takes a lot to get them to that point to reach out to me.
Same here. They have to really be sick of their WordPress
Yes.
websites
Case in
or
point.
whatever. They just can't take a broken plugin one
That's
more
exactly
time.
right. I'm not
I
dealing
totally
with any
feel
more plugins ever again. Exactly. Exactly.
so the point being, but then it's sort of like you do kind of have to always be out there so you're top
True.
of mind when that painful
That's right.
moment
That's right. And that's why it's
comes.
so hard to measure
That's
this because
yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
writing a blog a month for the last 7 years plus,
Yeah.
but I just don't know how many of those landed. But I got to keep doing it because I do
Yeah.
believe that it's keeping
Yeah.
me visible and it does reach
Yeah.
the odd person and they see me again and say, oh, that's a guy who does this. Okay, maybe he can help me.
Okay. Speaking of your blog, so is your kind of content marketing, because you are very present on LinkedIn and I know you produce a lot of content. Is your basic workflow like everything flows from your blog and you syndicate that content onto LinkedIn and your other social
It
platforms? Is that how
used
you
to
do it?
be, it was meant to be like that, Eleanor, but
Yeah.
sadly, it's not anymore. Um, my
Okay.
main thing has sort of become LinkedIn now. And I occasionally
Yeah.
will post something from a blog post or I will write a new blog post, but um, not anymore. The blog, it all used to start with the blog, but that's not the
Okay.
case anymore. And I might go back to that. But I was convinced after several years of doing the social selling and social marketing, I was convinced that for me, it made most sense to spend most of my time on LinkedIn, not Instagram, not Facebook. So I don't
Okay.
do that anymore. I used to do like
Yeah. Yeah.
schedule posts and stuff and go through Hootsuite and Buffer and
Yeah.
different things where, you schedule your
Mm-hmm.
post. I don't even do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just so I don't
Okay.
really have a system right now that I'm using. I kind of just if I have the time, I'll post or whatever. So um,
So you do it
I
directly
do
in
now.
LinkedIn.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not like,
I do now.
okay.
I
All
don't
right.
schedule at
Okay.
all. When I was using a virtual assistant, she was scheduling and she was
Mm-hmm.
creating great graphics for me on
Mm-hmm.
Canva and something that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't do. And she had a real Canva account. I don't. So things I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
now are based, sort of basic, and I don't really
Mm-hmm.
have a good system. But the reason for that is because post-pandemic, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
my corporate clients have come back, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of things, and I don't have time for the social marketing like I did a couple of years
Right.
ago. So that's a
Okay.
good thing and a bad thing, I guess.
So what is it? I mean, what would be your perfect equilibrium? Would you like a mix of these corporate clients or private clients, or do you want to go all private or
If you had asked me 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I would have said my perfect
Mhm.
scenario is just to have an independent coaching practice, which is completely me and nothing to do with any companies. That would have been my perfect scenario.
Mhm.
Now, I would say no. The mix
Mhm.
is good for me because I don't have the time or capacity or energy to sort of do all the 100% of the acquisition on my own and
Yeah.
100% of the marketing on my
Yeah.
own. I need and I rely on some of these organizational relationships and so I've
Mhm.
come to that. And again, I don't know if I've sort of settled for that or I've come to the conclusion
Mhm.
that's what I like best.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
to answer your question, a mix of the private individuals, but
Okay.
also some companies. And I don't have a lot of companies. I work for sort of three main companies right now, and I
Mhm.
still have these
Mhm.
three network partners that I work for occasionally. So right
Mhm.
now I have enough work
Mhm.
coming in, and the occasional individual client as well.
Mhm. Mhm. And what so you mentioned leadership. Like what are the areas that you focus on?
Um, well, yeah, leadership and
Mhm.
change because those two things,
Mhm.
well, those are big things. But like, okay, see, I was just coaching a guy before this call with you. He reached the executive level last year at his company,
Mhm.
and his direct boss is a guy who used to be a coaching client of mine years ago. This is
Okay.
in the
Yeah.
Allianz
Yeah.
world, And this guy, I coached him for, I don't know if it was a year or year and a half or whatever, off and on.
Mm-hmm.
And when so he's got a team of about 6, 7 direct reports. And
Mm-hmm.
one of his direct reports reached the executive level. And he told this guy, hey,
Mm-hmm.
there's this coach who helped me when I reached the executive level, developing
Mm-hmm.
things like executive presence. And, you know,
What is that? Like when you walk in the room, make sure your shoulders are squared and you
well,
puff out your
it's more
chest.
like
Like, what is
speaking
that?
with authority,
Yeah.
speaking with
Okay.
authority, conducting your way in a, I, yeah, it means everything and nothing. Um,
But this is where can I just to bring in the voice? So that I love this mix that you've got this like Tim Nash voice actor thing. Has that been helpful in your because that like how you speak is important and I'm sure you or my guess would be anyways that you can add some insights there. Or no, am
so
I
your
totally
question is
off?
if it's been helpful, or is that?
Like do you use that? Like so executive
Ah,
presence like has your background as a what did you call it a voice
yeah,
actor,
yeah,
a voice
which was just
over yeah.
started out of necessity and chance,
Yeah.
but the voice is huge when it comes to presence.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking about virtual presence, so one thing I talk about is you have to speak loudly enough so people hear you. If I'm
Yeah.
or slowly enough so people hear you. If you're speaking really quickly and you can't have any presence, right? The same way if I'm
Yeah,
speaking softly
okay.
then I can't
Yeah.
influence anybody, right? So whereas virtual
Yeah.
presence, the voice is very important if you want to influence people. Just like the camera is important. If you want to, they have to see you, they
Yeah.
have to hear you. It's common sense. A lot of what I do is common sense. So executive presence is the same
Yeah.
thing, but you could be the boss now, so people could be looking at you. So for example, just a simple example, like
Mhm.
if I wanted to help someone with their executive presence, I would, you know, tell them to be aware of. So if they're in a meeting, for example, or they are giving feedback to a direct report or something, you know,
Mhm.
they should not give that direct report the feeling that they're in a rush. So for example, don't look at your
Mhm.
watch. You
Ah.
know, don't constantly
Yeah.
like look at the clock, and don't make
Yeah.
the person you're giving feedback, don't make them feel like you're rushed or you have to go or you're in a hurry. You know,
Yeah.
so executive presence could be anything from, yes, walking into a room and speaking with authority, speaking slowly
Mhm.
enough and making eye contact with people, things like that, of
Mhm.
course, but also things like how
Okay,
you
yeah.
you behave. And an executive, who's somebody who's in a position of authority, who's giving feedback to people and whose reports are watching him, shouldn't be nervously checking their watch.
Right. I think I would fail that presence test. Uh, a
Uh,
side question, a tangent question. Do you coach both men
mhm.
and women, and do you find that you have to coach them differently on this like executive presence thing, or they're different issues?
Different issues, yes, but it's hard to generalize. I would say there are
Yeah.
differences, but they're more individual differences. So whereas so
Okay.
I've coached a lot of women, for example, helping them with
Mhm.
confidence. Getting their confidence up, especially like if
Mhm.
they've been on maternity leave, and they're re-entering the
Mhm.
workplace. And so yes, I would say you can generalize a certain amount and say that women have confidence issues more than men usually, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So confidence might
Mhm.
be, raising the confidence might be a goal for a woman I'm coaching, where maybe not for the man.
Mhm.
You know,
Okay. Okay, so the issues tend to be
issues can be different,
different.
but again, individuals are always different. So you might get I might have a woman
Yeah.
who that's not an issue at all, confidence.
What is like before you got
Mhm.
started with all this? Is there any one thing you wish you had known?
Before I got started as like a solopreneur, running my own business, kind of.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I would have liked to. Uh, maybe that. Well, first of all, relationships are really important. So
Yeah.
really take the time. Every coffee you have could lead to something, and don't be in a rush. Take the time to build relationships. Focus on the relationships, not the tasks around you. That would be certainly a lesson,
Mhm.
because the relationships are everything to somebody like me, what I'm doing.
Mhm.
So every
Mhm.
coffee could matter. Look, you and I, we had coffee just because we have a mutual friend. We had coffee 4 years ago, and
Yeah.
now occasionally
Yeah.
we connect, and talk about work, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
never know
Yeah.
where that
Yeah.
coffee is going to lead.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be my
Yeah. That was
advice.
4 years.
At least,
Jeez.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, can you tell people where they can find you?
Um, well, yeah, I still have my blog and as I said, my ecosystem, the path to peak performance. But I think my biggest presence these days is on LinkedIn. So the best
Okay.
way is just to do a
So,
search on Tim Nash, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and there you can find a link to my company website. But I suppose if you did a Google search on the path to peak performance, you could also find me. But my name probably is the
and is
safest
that
thing. It's
dot com
actually
or dot de?
www.pathtopeakperformance.org. I had to change
Dot
my
org.
domain.
Okay.
It used to be com, now it's org. I lost my com a couple
Okay.
years ago. So, but
Okay.
again, on the LinkedIn
Okay.
profile,
Yes.
you can access my company website.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Tim. It was great talking to you. Great to find out these things I
Yeah,
didn't know.
sure thing.
And I think people will get a lot out of this interview.
For
So
sure,
thanks for
Eleanor.
sharing.
Great to connect with you.
Thanks for listening. You can find this episode and all other episodes of the Germany Expat Business Show at my website at www.eleanormeyerhofer.com/podcast. That's www.eleanormeyerhofer.com/podcast. See you next time.